The quiet before the stormy. What is next for Donald Trump?
We can expect Trump, I think, to deploy the same unconventional persona as in the past to his new bid for the presidency. So he will rail against George Soros and fume against fictitious fraud in the previous election and dismiss any charges against him, whether involving Stormy Daniels or January 6th or anything else, as a partisan witch hunt. And the question is whether the target of all this, GOP primary voters, have any appetite left for circus clownish politics.
This would be the first time a former U.S. president would be indicted in our entire history as a nation. And look, I agree with probably everybody on this panel that if there is a flaming gun and a very bad crime committed, it doesn't matter who you are, you should be held accountable under U.S. law. But this is a stretch. If we're going to break a 200-year precedent of not arresting former presidents, I would hope that there's a better crime than paying off hush money to a stripper or a porn star.
Well, I would just respond. Yeah, I would respond to that, Joe Bob. You may get your wish, because in Atlanta there is a considered indictment coming down for what he did to try to influence the outcome of that election, which is pretty serious, and it's documented. So we'll see what's next. But listen, the reality is, I think it's already been mentioned, that this is Donald Trump. He's a salesman extraordinaire. He's a P.T. Barnum. He will use this, and he already has used this for a fundraising story over the last number of days to do this and to, run his campaign. And this is what he does. So, like you said, whether this is something that the appetite is there, obviously there are other people, but he does have a lock on a lot of people who believe that he is the man who believes in the principles that they believe in, and there's still part of the Republican base that's going to stick with him.
Yeah, the question is whether most of the Republican base is going to stick with him, and recent polls suggest that that is indeed the case. I mean, I think it's fair to say that if after two impeachments, the majority of Republicans still want Donald Trump, then I agree with Joe Bob. They're not going to be impressed by a misdemeanor involving hush money to a porn star. I think what is really being tested here is whether people in the middle of the American body politic are still prepared to have this kind of a president. Will it really remain the case that after January 6th and under these crazy circumstances, about half the voters are going to support this kind of candidate? It's fascinating, and I'm not sure the answer is yes.
It's going to embolden the base more to roll their eyes to the next thing that comes up. And again, this is all, in my opinion, being pushed by the political aspirations of a pretty out there DA.
The base is going to roll their eyes at almost anything, realistically, and Trump will portray almost anything as a witch hunt. I agree that the cartoonish aspect of this particular case may mean that it ultimately doesn't move the needle, but the cases coming down the pike, as we say, especially involving January 6th, very well might, not necessarily with the Republican base, but with voters in the center whom Trump needs in order to stand any chance in November 24.
Should Biden be worried about the Donald Trump protesting armies?
Well, of course, Biden should be concerned about mayhem and bloodshed and damage on the streets, but from the perspective of political utility purely, Biden can probably only benefit from Trumpian outrages. So since I'm assuming that Biden would rather run against Trump than DeSantis, I think his bigger worry may actually be from craziness that might damage Trump so bad that he's sidelined in favor of a more competent candidate.
Interesting. Are Democrats even in the race, gentlemen?
Mr. Klein may dispute this, but I think that the Democrats, many of them, are currently happy to let the Republicans tear each other to pieces and look like a bunch of clowns, while Biden does his best to speak as little as possible for fear of gaffes or whatnot, and project competence, which, talking points from the RNC aside, he is doing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, when you have a sitting president, Democrat or Republican, and they're the ones who are going to potentially be running again, and he certainly hasn't sent any messages that he's not, it sort of freezes the rest of the potential candidates for running.
I think the American people are also watching what's going on the Biden family end of things and are not liking any of that. And so, this is going to be a toss-up, in my opinion, but I think there's going to be a lot of resiliency from the Trump people, his supporters, because some of this is getting so ridiculous.
Yeah, I have to say, I don't see an American majority emerging in favor of the level of sordidness and chicanery that we see from Trump. What I do see potentially happening is the Democrats losing it. If it turns out that Biden appears incapable of carrying out his duties, if inflation isn't tamed, if the Republicans manage to present a narrative that somehow Trump aside seizes the imagination while the Democrats are seen to flail, maybe unfairly, because a lot of their troubles they inherited from Trump, I could see the Democrats losing.
I can't help but all agree here. I feel like the Democrats, it's kind of in their court whether or not they want to run with an old man or find a different alternative. But again, that's not discounting the fact that there's a lot of angry, more conservative center-right people out there that could feasibly go for either Trump or DeSantis.
I have to say, it also says a lot about the state of politics in America, that at the end of the day, Biden, with his difficulties, and Trump, with his ridiculousness, are the two candidates that we end up getting again. And this has a lot to do with politics around the world also.
Yeah, well, it's not for nothing that you're our All-Stars panelist, because even when you're all in agreement, it's still fascinating to listen to you all. So thank you very much, former Congressman Ron Klein, Joe Bob, and Dan Perry. Thank you for your time and insight.